Well, welcome, Dr. Lisle. We are here for our second episode of Eat When Hungry, and this episode will focus on journeying in and out of the shadows, and it's really a look at what it means to navigate oneself through change, thinking about topics such as mindset, reflection, and action, and how, in my case, how I did that personally, and sharing that story in a way that might shed light or give people ideas on how they can find their own agency in this journey, which is a place where we left off talking about in our last episode. So as we get into this today, do you have any reflective thoughts from our last conversation?
Well, I think that certainly just your whole story is such a remarkable one. I mean, very few people have gone on a journey that and gone that far that fast. But the one thing that I think we talked about is that that people overestimate what they can do in a day, but they underestimate what can be done in a year. And so your story, to me, as I think back on this, is this is a spectacular demonstration of basically the power of simple sound principles and then just putting them into action and seeing how a life can have a major component improve dramatically in just a year's time. So that's what I'm reflecting on. I mean, in our last conversation, you had mentioned that you fell off track for 10 or 11 years or something like that. Could you tell us about that?
Yes. So in 2009 or so, I found Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Furman, and I was searching in the middle of the night in Amazon and ran across Eat to Live, and it's something that appealed to me because I had tried on numerous occasions to be plant-based, but had been unable to figure out how to make that work for me. And so this gave me a clearer plan, and I implemented it, and I lost weight in the same trajectory that I did in 2020 when I was finally successful with it. But there were several things that I did not understand when I did it in 2009. And some of those things fell into the idea of mindset. Some of them fell into the idea of food's power over me. I use the framework of food addiction to help me understand it. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the nature of addiction, and I find it a helpful framework because it helps me fight my distortions about weight and food and how things may not be as bad as I might think they are. And I've found that I've had to really get my arms around managing my own distortions to live at a healthy weight. And so the food addiction framework that I learned in 2009 was really helpful. And it really stems back to a situation where we went out to eat. It was, a special occasion, and I decided to have French fries instead of a
Yeah.
salad. And that in and of itself created the desire for me to have more food. I
Yeah.
didn't have the right foods at home. And so in some regards, it was like a one food topple, but in other regards, there were a lot of extenuating circumstances that were around that I needed to understand as well. And so I think my point is, as I think about this, is that I can point to a specific incident for my failure, but I can also point to things that I learned that came out of that failure that took me a long time to put the pieces together to become successful again in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great story because in clinical psychology we work with addiction, and we hear stories of addiction about there was a moment where a person made a decision and effectively there could be different pressures that would result in that decision, but one of them is essentially forgetting that you're vulnerable. It's a there's a I call it, in order to get people's attention, I call it arrogance. It's not really arrogant in the way that we think of arrogance, but it's overconfidence, because you may have been doing something well for months or for years, and you just don't at that moment see yourself as susceptible anymore in that way. So that is I didn't know that you had a major run at this thing before, and I'm almost, I'm not surprised, because whenever I hear people that have made major transformations, usually there was some groundwork that was set. Usually the person doesn't just win an Oscar. Usually they had a 15-year history and 3 really good films before they got some big thing. And the success didn't happen overnight. And so, yeah, this is interesting. When you go get in trouble behind this, we spin out there, and then we were in trouble for a long time. What then sort of made you decide to lose weight when you decided to take this second big effort?
Well, I thought about my success in the weight loss every single day. And every single day, I thought, I need to do that again. I need to start tomorrow. I need to do that. And there was always a reason why I didn't start tomorrow. And ultimately, there were a lot of things I still needed to learn to be able to make it work. I would say a big part of that, which will be a theme of our session today, is that I didn't know how to fail. I had learned how to succeed, but I didn't know how to fail. And I realized that through doing a lot of perfectionism research that was really meant to help our stakeholders in the school district that I worked in. And I was doing different learning academy sessions for parents, for teachers, even working with students on issues around perfectionism, which is a human quality, not necessarily a quality that is limited to a few people. And sometimes I think that people think that perfectionism is only limited to a few people. And so that really set the stage for me to have some learning that I needed around failure and how to negotiate failure in myself. So that was part of the puzzle. So was the fact that I thought that I was going to spend my whole life thinking about doing this tomorrow, because when I thought about the fact that years were going by and I wasn't able to execute again, that was causing me a great deal of distress. Additionally, I have lost more than half my weight. And so I was feeling the physical impact of a lifetime of morbid obesity, a lifetime of obesity. And so I really wanted to change the trajectory of my life. I often talk about the space between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. being instrumental in creating that change for me, because during that time would be the time that I could run away from my choices less than I could in the daytime. So those were some of the things that fell into place for me to set the stage for success later. So when I decided to get serious about it, I spent several weeks planning around myself and thinking about what had led me to be successful around my weight loss in the past and what had been part of my failures in the past. And I really did a lot of reflection to create a plan for myself around who I was that was honest for what I needed to do.
That's really unusual, so I obviously, as an educator, you're as interested in failure as you are in success. It's important for you guys to be thinking about that, but we don't a lot of times think about that in clinical psychology. So that was an interesting, another little tool that you brought to this problem, and actually having failed fairly spectacularly because you had succeeded spectacularly before. So that would have given you a dose of humility that just knowing how to succeed wasn't enough. Very, very interesting. All right, in your video with the Venn diagram, you talk about all or nothing thinking. How have you worked through this all or nothing thinking sort of for yourself?
Yeah, so perfectionism is really all or nothing thinking. And we talked about the ego trap last time, which I
Yes.
really like that particular term because it, I think, lends itself to what I was talking about earlier, and that is the human nature of, all or nothing thinking. And I didn't realize that all or nothing thinking was a part of my weight journey until I really started considering it. So part of what I did to work myself out of that was I acknowledged the things that were all or nothing about
Mhm.
about myself. And the line that I drew at first was that processed food was an all or nothing thing for me. I could not have processed food because I recognized that it wreaked havoc on my cravings. And you
Mhm.
talked, I think, in our first episode, you used a verb that I really, really like around the pleasure trap. And that is the idea that we have to override our system. And that was not a verb that I was using at that time, but I was using, similar ideas around, you know, uh, subduing my hunger drive or the agitation that came out of it that I knew had come from processed foods. So that was an all or nothing thing that I had to accept, that processed foods moderation was no longer going to be part of my life.
Right.
Then to negotiate that, I also knew that I couldn't have all or nothing thinking about everything. So
Mhm.
I I balance the fact that I have this all or nothing body
Yes.
with the fact that I needed to avoid all or nothing thinking. And so that
Yeah.
tension is kind of a constant tension and success. And the way that I have negotiated that is that I created a failure plan that I still live by.
Yeah.
And it allows me ways where I live within the all or nothing parts of my body,
Yeah.
but I can't always meet my expectations. And so if I am going to fail, this is the pathway to my failure. And so that
Yeah.
is a really important part of the way that I live my life. And while some of the details of my failure plan have changed, the
Yeah.
fact is that I still have a failure plan and it is an integral part of my success.
Super interesting. How did you plan for your success and for your failure when you first started?
That's a great question too, because success is something that when I thought about my life, I spent some time looking at my life and I realized that I wasn't failing all of the time. And that was
Mhm.
really an important insight that I think gets into not seeing yourself at a deficit all the time and recognizing that I had some strengths going into this fight and that I didn't need to fix everything about my life. I needed to change things, but I didn't need to change the times that were already successful when I was eating healthy foods, when I was
Yeah.
not having processed foods. And that was really important for me to break down my life and not see everything as this looming gigantic sense of failure. And then
Right.
starting to target, okay, this is a Friday nights are a failure time for me. What am I going to do about Friday nights? Special occasions are a failure time for me. What am I going to do about special occasions? And I started really just breaking it down into smaller pieces because I knew that that was going to be the way that I could make the changes.
Really interesting. I can remember, I don't remember when it was, but there was some, it might have been a Halloween. I think it was a Thanksgiving, 25 years ago or whatever it was, where that literally the social aura was that you just ate till you felt sick. Like that's what you were supposed to do. And
Mhm.
if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't grown like all the older adults and lamented how self-indulgent you were, and that was truly enjoyment, um, then you haven't really done it right, if that's what life is about. And I was just getting knowledgeable enough about food and health. It was probably 35 years ago. That one, I remember one Thanksgiving, or it was Halloween, but I think it was Thanksgiving, almost positive, where I decided to just actually just eat intelligently that day the way I was doing other days. And I remember leaving sort of Thanksgiving dinner, not all completely weighted down, not, feeling disgusted, not feeling self-indulgent, actually just feeling completely healthy and fit like I normally did. And I thought, that's interesting. I didn't actually have to do that thing. And and it was to this day, I do not, I use that same idea at Thanksgiving that, no, I'm not going to be particularly indulgent at all. And I'm just going to, I'm going to stay within, extremely reasonable boundary lines. Anyway, it's a long story, but it's interesting. I haven't heard anybody ever say, have to plan for special occasions and plan for Friday night. It's like, you better do that because I'm having a lot of success over here, but over here is where I consistently wind up in tougher circumstances. But that's really interesting. Did you have any specific strategies that you used when you're first getting going that helped you to be successful or to manage failures when they happen?
Well, I have my calendar from 2020, which is ironically called The Road to Better Health. And we got this at work. And
Yeah.
so I knew that I knew what a good day was. I didn't have to overanalyze what a good day was. And so literally you are looking at what I did when I started out.
Yes.
And
Got it.
every day, January, I'm proud to say, had stars every single day. And so my goal when I started was I need to have a good day, and it wasn't parsing out this much of that or this much of that. It was holistically speaking, is that a good day toward weight loss?
Yes.
I knew the difference, and I didn't need to overanalyze it. All I needed to do was string together successful days. And of course, I was trying to override my hunger drive at that point because the pull to the pleasure trap was really deep within me then. The food didn't taste good. I really didn't want to be eating it. I didn't like beans. And I had a lot of things that I needed to work through at that point. And so all I was doing was stringing together successful days. And then actually, if we get into February, you can start to see that I wobbled. No stars. That was my wobble. COVID was starting, the news of COVID was starting to infiltrate, and I started to worry about it. And my sense of balance got off, and I started letting a few things in, and the scale went up 10 pounds very, very, very quickly. Some of it was salt. Some of it was the fact that I was back in my old patterns that I wanted to break. And so then this is March. I got myself back on track, and that was the March 13th was our last day at school, and I forgot my calendar at work. And then I couldn't go back for several months to get it. And so I wasn't able to do that, but I continued my star journey for a while yet. I don't have to do that every day now, but once in a while, I have to go back to that just because I still fight the same battles with myself. And if I need to, kind of redirect things, that's a really good way for me to do so.
Yeah, as we think about that, I mean, I think that's I did not know until you told us the story that you actually began this journey and had a significant amount of effort had gone into this before COVID hit. So when you and I had talked at other times, I had thought that you sort of took COVID as the opportunity, but instead you already had determined momentum going into this thing. COVID then starts to derail things. but then you seize the opportunity that opened up there to get right back on track and do this. So this is interesting. Your any changes in strategies, since you started for either success or for failure?
Yeah, I still am. I still always have a failure plan. What I'm going to do when I fail, I have substitute foods. So
Yeah.
if I want to have something sweet, I will indulge in sometimes dried fruit. Dates are a big thing. They're part of my success and failure plan.
Yeah.
Apples and bananas are always part of it. Their apples are particularly good, I think, because of the water content. Uh,
Yes.
uh, and and so I have foods that I will go to if I'm going to get off in my balance and I want something sweet. This is what I do. I do sometimes have air pop popcorn in place of things like potato chips. I always talk about the fact that potato chips are probably my biggest trigger. I
Yeah.
do not live in a house that is potato chip free. So
Yeah.
nor any other trigger. And I could look at many of the foods in my house and identify times where I had, fallen into abuse with those few foods, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I'm always trying to override that system. And cucumbers can serve the need of potato chips too. I would say popcorn. If it's a worse type of craving, I'd go for popcorn because of calorie density, but cucumbers
Yeah.
can do the same thing. In terms of comfort foods, I was always after bean pasta in place of, anything that would be warm and savory and a trigger for me. And so replacement foods has been a really important part of my strategy. I would also say that when I first started out, I gave myself a 3-day rule. Like if I fell off, I would fall off with some of those foods. And you mentioned Thanksgiving earlier. My first Thanksgiving was very much a planned failure. And I really fell off those 3 days. And I made all sorts of really rich stuff that I probably haven't made since and really
Right.
feel very good at the end of those 3 days.
Yeah.
And while I have fallen off since then, I would say that the next Thanksgivings have gone the other way, like you were describing, that you didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Instead of using them as opportunities to indulge, I typically will increase my nutrient density and my healthy foods going into a holiday so that
Yeah.
I can actually back down instead of lean into it. I lean out of it. And
Yeah.
that feels really good. And
Yeah.
it's a strategy now that I use too when I'm preparing for special occasions. I know that I want to go into those with healthier foods and cleaner foods in the days ahead than
Yes.
might be part of my everyday experience. And
That's a really interesting thing. That's
eating very
never heard that one before. So these are great. That's the beauty of talking to somebody who's actually been on a journey and been through an awful lot of wars, is that they can tell you an awful lot of little details about the landscape and how they managed it. That's different than a celebrity who just went on, Weight Watchers or something and lost 50 pounds, and they're going to tell us how great it is. It's like, yeah, you didn't do anything. There's some short-term, highly incentivized trick just went on there that we have no confidence in if we're a smart consumer. This is a story of we're hearing about all these details. Super interesting. What are the most challenging parts about these mindset, action, reflection? When you experience challenges, what sorts of other sorts of things that you do? That was a great thing about the idea about how you now approach something like Thanksgiving or a special occasion. Any other kinds of things like that?
I think one of the most helpful things might be is to make neuroadaptation work for you. Um,
Yeah.
and the fact is that we do get used to the different foods and the tastes, especially like Dr. Lisle, you have talked about in the pleasure trap so beautifully around how the modern foods, we as human beings are not made for these modern foods and the challenges that come from them. And so a very deliberate strategy that I have used is to make neuroadaptation work for me. And there's really 3 different levels to that. There's the long haul of it. So if you, for example, are just starting out on this journey, if you add greens and beans and raw vegetables and some of the things that might not taste very good to you right now, but over time they will start to taste better. I gave the example of beans. I did not like beans very much when I started. I love beans now. And the radish is my current symbol of this because I don't like radishes very much, and I'm trying to like radishes. And so there's the long haul of eating radishes regularly over my life to try to get used to them. But then there's also the neuroadaptation that I think occurs every single day. So I always am trying to lean into what I am least likely to want to eat, and I eat that first thing in the day. So I have had radishes for breakfast a lot this summer because I know my day will get better food-wise after the radish. And I will say that there are other things that I do too. So in the summertime, I don't like my cooked vegetables as much. So I might have my cooked vegetables first thing in the morning, like a soup, which is, I think another strategy is to for me, getting rid of the idea that something that I needed something really sweet and high calorie for breakfast was really important. And so in the winter time, I like my cooked vegetables better. So I will have my raw vegetables more likely in the morning. And so each day is an opportunity to make neuroadaptation work too, to start with the things that I am least likely to eat. And that means that I start with a win. And success breeds success in this journey. So I think that that can be a really helpful thing for people to keep in mind. And then I also think in terms of a meal. So just like I get used to the foods over time, and then I start the day with the things I don't want to eat the most, I start each meal with the things I don't want to eat the most. And I always go to what I want to eat the most at the end. And so those are some real important strategies for me to help me have a win at the beginning of each day and a win at the beginning of each meal.
That is a great, I've thought about that a little bit for the notion of for some people to get moving, to get up in the morning and then do 15-20 minutes of exercise and then eat something healthy to give them sort of 2 big wins in a row. But that the notion of trying to move your diet to what you know is good, but it's the least appealing first, where you got a whole bunch of willpower in the morning, it's a new day and a new beginning, and get a wins behind you. I think that's great. That's terrific. What advice would you have around mindset, reflections, actions past that? Those are great ideas. Anything else that comes to mind that has been part of your journey?
My grandmother used to say, wherever you go, there you are. And it is a phrase that I think about over and over again, partly because of the idea of something that you and I have talked a lot about, but I was not broken and I am not fixed. There are a couple different levels where that I think really defines my life. One of those levels was how people perceived me. But then there's also the level of how I need to negotiate myself through change, is that I am that same person. My battles are still the same battles. And I know that if I don't override my hunger drive in relation to the modern food environment and processed foods, specifically salt, oil, sugar, and then some of my minor triggers that I can kind of come in and out of, I will be right back where I started. One of my distortions in the past has been that I thought that if I lost the weight, I would have it made, so to speak. And that's not the way life works. I still face myself over and over and over again. And you know, there's a lot of different distortions that come up in the process of this journey, and always trying to figure out what the healthy spot is in the middle of those, so that I can stay focused on myself, is important. But knowing yourself to negotiate change becomes really important. And it's not about what work. I mean, strategies that work for other people work for me, but sometimes there are things that are unique about myself that other people can go in situations and they can maybe have a meal of French fries and not have trouble with it, but I have learned that I can't. So, you know, continuing to be honest about who I am is probably one of the most important things, because if I think about transforming shadows, I can't transform anything if I don't have a starting point about from a position of honesty. And so that, I think, will come out in some of our later episodes as well, around being honest about who I am in relation to food.
Yeah, fabulous. Really, really great. I'm trying to think about so many things that come up for me as you talk about this. It's the sort of knowing yourself. You sometimes, when people are beginning, or they have energy behind this because they've learned something, that they finally see a path. I'm happy for them when they begin and they have some success. However, I am so aware that the journey is going to be different than they think. This is, it's kind of like reading some get rich quick book, you know, from the 1970s. It's like, you know, 7 easy steps to $1 million. And it's like, yeah, actually, the guy that wrote this thing went through a tremendous amount of metamorphosis and change. And for 25 years, he had all kinds of plans and they failed. And I actually know about this story. There was a guy named, I forgot his name. He had a famous ad that he would take out in the Los Angeles Times every weekend. Huge one-page ad called "The Lazy Man's Way to Riches." His name was Joe Carbo, and so you'd read it and you'd be like, "Wow, this is what this guy did. It was so easy." And then you find out the real story of Joe Carbo, and he worked so hard. He had so many ups and downs, and it was a very different story. And so your story is one that really tells us this about all these little maneuvers that you have, and this sort of Zen dance that you do inside to keep yourself. You know, you have to hold on tight, but not too tight, and be flexible. This is great stuff. How people may be seeing this on somewhere where they're looking for me.
Yes.
That's possible in the future. How can they find you?
Yes, so my social media is Transform Shadows. That is the way that I am telling my story, and it is, I would say, it's a self-improvement, you know, process-based way of making change. In my case, it's making change around my weight and weight loss and that sort of thing. But many of the principles that we've talked about today, in terms of thinking about how to maneuver oneself through change, I have found success in maneuvering myself in other ways in my life around change. And you know, centering failure, naming failure can be really important in lots of different ways, because it takes away the worst of what a situation can be. And I don't know, I find a lot of success in by naming that failure. So Transform Shadows is really a process-based way of thinking about making change that goes against maybe what a pattern has been in over time, or what someone wants to default to in their lives, and a very intentional way of making change. And it doesn't have all the answers for sure, but it is a way to think about the ongoing nature of change through the ups and downs. And so I have a Instagram, Transform Shadows. I have a Facebook Transform Shadows page. If they find our program looking for you, they're going to find Transform Shadows, my YouTube channel. And so I have a number of different aspects of social media, including my website, transformshadows.com, that anchors all of it together. So
Fabulous.
yeah,
Great.
well,
We've got a couple more of these planned for the future. I look forward to this and look forward to what other new domains we're going to explore.
yes, I do too. And I look forward to getting into the pleasure trap and talking about those dimensions of the hunger drive, as well as some of the other things that I think play a role in people's success in ways that might get less press. Thank you for joining me here today and for being so gracious to have this conversation around some of the things that worked for me. So I
Fantastic.
appreciate that.
Fabulous. We'll see. Look forward to next time.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Dr. Lisle.
You bet.